again. Welcome to Awkwardly Zen. This is our class on Lenormand cards, and I've got Nicole and Robin who are going to come in and introduce themselves and then talk with us a little bit about this lovely divination tool that is so special. So I'm so glad they're here today. I'm going to pass it to you guys.
All righty. So hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm super excited to teach about Lenormand. It's taken me a year to get this class together, but I finally did. So I'm super excited. And I'm really excited to have Nicole here to teach with me, partly because I love not teaching by myself, but partly because Nicole is like so passionate and knowledgeable and amazing about Lenormand. Do you want to introduce yourself, Nicole, before we dive in here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robin. And Robin is incredibly knowledgeable as well. In fact, I think of her as like the expert in Lenormand, and I'm sort of like the novice intermediate. So I am a Lenormand lover because it is easy compared to tarot. I think it's a lot easier. So it's like, it's nice to kind of dive into something that you kind of get get comfortable with it and then move on to more difficult things if you want to.
Okay, so the two of us together are going to kind of tag team back and forth on our different perspectives on Lenormand. And I wanted to mention something. I had a lot of fun putting this class together, and I illustrated it with pictures of my husband's and my trip to Paris back in the pre-COVID days. So that was all exciting because Lenormand, Ms. Lenormand was from Paris. She lived in Paris. But I have to say, I have this sort of like deathly fear of offending all the tarot lovers out there. And I just want to let you know, I am a tarot lover. I am a tarot lover. I read tarot. I've designed my own tarot decks. Okay. However, I believe that Lenormand has a few advantages over tarot in a few certain spots, and that they both have an important place in the diviner's toolkit. So depending on what the question is, I might choose tarot or Lenormand. However, I feel like tarot has about a bazillion lovers already out there. And Lenormand has a small but vocal cheering section in the corner of the bleachers. So I hope today you guys will give me leave to tout Lenormand and say how amazing it is and compare it to tarot, knowing that we still love tarot, but we are pointing out some advantages of Lenormand by comparison. I also am making some general statements about tarot, and any of you guys who love tarot might be like, that's totally not the way I read tarot. It doesn't have to be that way with tarot, and I welcome you to place your opinion in the chat, knowing that we all have different ways of working with tarot. So anyway, that's my tarot lovers. I love you. I am one of you. But we're introducing a new person to the party today, and I am focusing on her wonderful attributes and beauty. Okay. Okay. And then as far as readings, I see a lot of you guys saying you're interested in a reading. Okay. I will point out that many people use Lenormand cards for predictive readings, but neither Nicole nor I is a predictive reader. So we're not going to say, yes, you're going to get pregnant. No, you're not going to get that job. Yes, it's cancer. We're not going to do readings like that. And so what both of us agreed is that the type of reading we're willing to demo today is what do I need to know about blank? What do I need to know about how to succeed in my job, how to be less anxious, how to deal with COVID, how to figure out whether I should move? So if you're thinking about wanting a reading, those are the kinds of questions that we are prepared to answer for you. I think there are many amazing, great predictive readers out there, and you might have predictive gifts, but for me, answering yes, no questions, and for Nicole, it's just not our sweet spot. Okay.
Yeah, and if I could just pop in, I always think of it as like, especially with Lenormand, and we're looking at like the future, I think of it as the probable future. Because every day we make decisions, and we make multiple decisions every single day. So this is the probable future, or the probable outcome for your question. Nothing is set in stone.
Yeah. Okay, I want to do a quick grounding because I super need it so I can calm down and get my brain together, and then we will dive in. Okay, so I'm just inviting you to settle into your space, ground down into the earth, out into nature, up into the stars, center yourself in your heart, or all of the above if you prefer. That's what I do. Let's relax and let any cares of our day, who's going to win the Masters? That's my biggest thing. I always relax by watching golf. So I'm not going to worry about the Masters right now. To-do list, other people. We're just going to let that drift away so we can focus on taking this time for ourselves and discovering our beautiful divination system You can always pick up those concerns later if you want. I want to thank everybody who came and all the positive spirits that are here to support us today. Ask for a nice filter of protection around us to filter out any negative energies, and set the intention that we'll all come away with whatever's for our own highest good, and that we will not have any cords or attachments for anybody that's in this room that's not for our highest good. We'll all separate and go on to our own beautiful days. And I'm just going to leave you a moment to set your own intention for what you're hoping to get out of today, and ask for any spiritual support that you might want to ask for, your higher self, spirit, source, your power animal, your ancestors. When you're ready, you can take a deep breath and come on back, and we will get going. All right, I'm going to share my screen. I've got a slide presentation. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will stop periodically and ask whether anybody has any questions. And if I freeze for a couple seconds, just wait 30 seconds, I'll come right back. And then Ari will tell me that you guys lost me when I was talking about the ring, and we'll back right up. Okay, so audience participation moments. I love audience participation because it tells me that I'm not frozen, that people can still hear me. So we're gonna do a quick exercise, all right? Now, if I held up a picture of a ring, this is a wedding ring. In the 19th century, it was not only diamonds. That's a factor of the diamond marketing industry. And I asked you, or maybe you could just, the random person on the street, what is the ring a symbol of? What does a ring symbolize? Put that in the chat. Any thoughts? Top of your head, there's no wrong answer right here. A ring symbolizes a proposal. Great. Marriage, commitment. You guys are so right. That's exactly what a ring symbolizes in Lenormand. Congratulations. You can all read Lenormand cards. Eternity. Perfect. If a ring comes up in your reading, there's a marriage, there's a commitment, there's a partnership, there's something that's a relationship between two people. Okay. How about a bear? What are some characteristics of a bear? Like if I ask my 5-year-old niece, what is a bear? Strength. Hibernation. Yes. Right? It's a strong animal. It's a fierce animal. Congratulations. You all know how to read Lenormand cards. That's exactly what this symbolizes. Right? If the bear comes up in your reading, you might need to exercise some personal power, or maybe there's a powerful person. Okay. I know, right? You can all go home. You know everything about Lenormand cards already. Okay. So let's say you ask a question of your Lenormand cards, like, what can I do to succeed at work? I feel like I'm kind of like floundering. All right. And what you get 2 cards. You pull 2 cards. You get a ring and a bear. That's the question. What can I do to succeed at work? So let's figure out who are the strong people at work, right? In the chat, who's a powerful person in a standard workplace? Who has a position of power at work? The boss, exactly. What kind of relationship, right, ring, what kind of relationship would it be good to have with your boss? Marry the boss's daughter. Oh my gosh, we have a genius Lenormand card reader already. Right, a coworker who's been there for a long time. Somebody who knows how to do things. So we could look at this and say, well, make a relationship with a powerful person. You know, maybe you've been afraid of the boss and you've been kind of just keeping your head down. And that's why you're not getting great opportunities. And you need to make a stronger relationship with your boss. Or maybe we could look at it the other way around. Maybe what we need here is actually a more powerful relationship. Maybe you've got a coworker and you've just been agreeing to everything they said because you think they know more than you do. And you're like, wait a second, I need to leverage this relationship so that I can have more power. Stand up for my own idea. That's how Lenormand card works, right? We're taking the basic symbols and we're applying them to the situation and the topic of the reading, whatever it is. And I have just illustrated one of the main, in my opinion, advantages of Lenormand over tarot, which is that the symbols, by and large, are super intuitive. It's not a matter of like, oh, I see 2 people standing under a Renaissance canopy on this card. What does that mean for my insurance question? Right? A lot of the thing that we like about Lenormand is that the symbols are really intuitive and it leaves a lot of extra room for your intuition. Okay, so great job. Now I know you guys can use the chat. I know you can read Lenormand cards. and we will dive into our presentation. There's a little more than this. I just wanted to, but that was great. Okay. So, all right. Now, I want to let you know, of course, there's a ton of other stuff that we could have shared about Lenormand cards, and we had narrow it down for today. Lots of stuff on video, on YouTube. I'm writing a book, will come out, that has a lot of these ideas and a bunch more stuff in it. But hopefully this will be a good basic introduction to you. All right, I titled this Luminous Lenormand mainly because I wanted another word that started with L. Lenormand, Ms. Lenormand was a French psychic, and we're going to talk about her in just a moment. This is the Garden of the Tuileries, which is where this palace here on the right is where a lot of the figures in the French Revolution were imprisoned while they waited for their trial and then their turn at the guillotine, although now it's just this gorgeous park. But I wanted to mention it because it's really important to understand sort of the background of the 19th century symbolism, because some things symbolized in the 19th century are a little different from what they symbolize today. And that helps us understand more about where the Lenormand cards are coming from. But if you look at the Lenormand cards here, you can see we've got a coffin. Quick guess, what do we think a coffin might symbolize? Stick in the chat. Symbols for a coffin. Can you read, Nicole, to me? What are people saying about a coffin?
Let me see. Ending, death.
Yes, you guys are geniuses. How about clover? What do we think clover is a symbol of?
Luck.
Luck, exactly, right? A small amount of good luck. We're going to come back to this reading, and so you'll see. But you can see that you guys are already easily able to put this together. And that's part of what's so great about Lenormand. It's great for beginners. It's great for kids. It's for teenagers, because it's so easy to put the pieces together. All right. Okay, so let's dive into what we're talking about today with Lenormand. So, brief history of Lenormand cards. This is another famous cafe in Paris where many French Revolution people plotted. This was Benjamin Franklin's favorite hangout in Paris. And I'm mentioning Paris a lot because Marie Lenormand, her name means a person from Normandy. So that's where her family came from. But she was a very famous psychic during the French Revolution, 1772 to 1843. She read for Napoleon, who threw her in jail because he didn't like her reading. She read for Josephine. She read for all kinds of famous people. And she was famous because she wrote a whole bunch of books about all her adventures reading for these people. So everybody knew that Marie Lenormand was this famous psychic. The interesting thing about her is she did not actually read Lenormand cards. She read regular playing cards. She read something called the 33 Greek sticks. Nobody really knows what those are. But after her death, people started to capitalize on her name. And in 1845, something was published called The Grand Jeu de Mademoiselle Lenormand, which is like Miss Lenormand's Big Game. It was 54 cards. It had a basic set of symbols. It was published in France. And then in 1846, somebody published in Germany the Petite Lenormand, which had 36 cards. And that is basically the set of cards that we are using today. It was derived from a German card game that was published in 1799 called The Game of Hope. And it's got 36 symbols, and it's basically unchanged since then. So unlike the tarot, which really has its roots in like the Renaissance, Lenormand cards are very like practically related to daily town and city life. And that's partly why I have so many pictures of Paris here, because they're relatable to us in some sense, because they were made for people who were living the same sort of life that we are living. And that's why they're full of symbols that symbolize the things that we care about. So after this fortune-telling deck, the Little Lenormand was published, it became popular really mostly in Eastern Europe and on the continent. And it wasn't until the 20th century that people in Britain and America really got interested with the rise of metaphysics. There are multiple schools of Lenormand reading. There's like a continental school, and then there's a British school, and you may not be interested in any sort of school. You can make up your own meanings if you want to, but you will find occasionally some disagreement about what cards represent, their traditional meanings and modern meanings. And so I give you, as the school mistress of today, I give you permission to pick and choose from whatever school you want to, and really put together a set of meanings that's meaningful for you, which is another thing we're going to talk about today. And I will mention, by the way, this is the picture of the Game of Hope. You can see here German Das Spiel der Hoffnung, The Game of Hope. You can buy this on Amazon. It's been reprinted. But the interesting thing about the Amazon, ad is that it says that Miss Lenormand actually used the Game of Hope cards. And I have found no evidence to that. And also she had passed away by the time they were published as the Lenormand deck. So I'm not sure the ad is correct that she actually did use them herself, but if you want to go back and buy some of these early decks, they are available on Etsy and on Amazon. All right, so here's my dreaded Lenormand Tarot comparison. And again, I'm up for anybody else's take on this after I present my own thoughts on it. So here's how I summarized the tarot. 78 cards, major and the minor arcana. The major ones are like the people, the Fool, the Hierophant, the Hermit. The minor arcana are the suits, the pentacles and swords, and they're all numbered, right? I say Renaissance drawing rooms because the tarot was developed from a card game back in the day when really only wealthy people could play cards because it was before mass printing. And so you had to be really wealthy to have a deck of cards. And in fact, they were often given away as presents by rich people to other rich people as a show of wealth. So a lot of the symbolism in the tarot is very esoteric, it's occult, it's magical. There are references to history and mythology. And it takes a lot of brain power, in my opinion, to read tarot cards because you're constantly thinking about all the references and a lot of them are not quite as direct as they could be. And then typically with a tarot deck, you have a question and then you decide how many cards you're going to pull out and what shape, and you're trying to mesh the spread to the question itself. So to contrast with Lenormand, you have 36 cards. Now, some decks have a few extra, but you can see it's less than half as many cards as tarot, right? So it's a smaller set of symbols to work with. It's all symbols. It's all things like ring and bear and fish and flowers. There aren't two levels. There are no numbers that you have to do. The cards are numbered, but you don't need to actually use them. And then as I've said, it's much more focused on town and city daily life. And that's partly because Lenormand is also from a card game, but because it's a couple hundred years later, at this point, middle-class people were starting to also play cards. Cards were mass printed. They were something regular people could afford. And so it was more like, hey, let's go hang out at the coffee shop and we'll all play cards, rather than, okay, well, we can only play cards if we're invited to this fancy party and have a lot of upper class education. So the whole feel for me, the energetic feel of the Lenormand deck is much more like regular life, hanging out with your friends, getting information on practical matters like work and relationships and home and things like that. The meanings, as I demonstrated with all of you genius readers out there who managed to do a Lenormand card reading, even though many of you had never really seen the deck before or hadn't used it, the readings are very practical and concrete. And one of the coolest things about Lenormand is that you can read all of the cards without even having a question. So if you get to a place where you're just like, I don't know, life doesn't feel good, I don't know what I should ask, I feel like there's a message out there for me, but I don't know what it is, there's a way to actually just pull out the Lenormand cards and figure out what that is without having to come up with a question. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So I think that's an advantage of Lenormand over tarot, that if you're feeling a little bit clueless, or your brain is just kind of tired, or you just want some easy, practical advice without having to dig through a lot of symbolism, Lenormand is a great choice for that. And I'll just illustrate that here. Here's some basic Lenormand cards. Ring, you guys already know what that's a symbol of. Flowers, like if I went to my 8-year-old niece and I said to her, what do flowers symbolize? What are flowers like? She would be like, pretty, they smell good, something nice in life, something you would give to people, like a gift for mom on Mother's Day. That's exactly what flowers symbolize, right? The lady is, bated breath, a symbol of a lady. It's a woman in the life someplace, right? And if you compare that to tarot, right? I just pulled a bunch of random tarot cards. So if I ask my 8-year-old niece, all right, what's the devil a symbol of? Well, she might have some ideas, but then she might look at this card and say, is that actually the devil? And I would have to say, well, no, actually it's the god Pan. And then we'd have to go into this long explanation, right, of who these people are and what they're doing. The 7 of Pentacles is not a symbol of anything unless you happen to know what tarot meanings are. And the moon is kind of interesting because there is a moon card in Lenormand and it symbolizes your subconscious or your emotions. But you can see the moon card in tarot has a whole bunch of extra imagery in it, right? We've got the dog and the wolf or the dog and the jackal, and the wild side and the tame side, and there's the crawfish coming out of the water and the two paths. And so it's just a much more like simple, direct way of looking at things. And I think this is helpful for me because sometimes I feel like this leaves more room for my own intuition. Like I'm not so busy thinking about the tarot symbolism. I can just relax and connect with what the symbols are bringing up for me. Does anybody have any questions so far about this basic? Have I offended anybody terribly who has to say something about tarot that I misspoke anyway?
As a tarot reader, I think you handled that beautifully. And anyone who's studying tarot knows that at the beginning, it's really complicated. So I think it was beautifully done. We did have a question. Are all the symbols, like those 36 cards, are they the same in every deck? Is it like tarot where you have to have them the same?
So the 36 symbols are the same in every deck. And then some decks have added extra symbols, which we're going to cover. I have some examples of that coming in a little bit later. So you basically always get the same 36 cards. And then on top of that, some decks have more cards on different topics, which you can always take out if you decide you don't want to use them.
Perfect. And then the only other thing is when you show a deck, would you make sure that you let us know what the deck is? And you did that with this last one. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're totally welcome. So this tarot deck is the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. And then the Lenormand deck that I'm using here is called the Bluebird Lenormand. And one of the reasons I like it is that every card has a little poem on it that reminds you what the card meaning is. So it's great for beginners because the cards actually literally like have a poem that tell you what this symbolizes. And also I kind of like the vintage sort of 19th century feel for them. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we move on? Great. All right, now it is Nicole's turn, and she's going to chime in with why I love Lenormand.
Thank you so much. So, Lenormand, why do I love it? Well, just to start off, like Robin said, it is only 36 cards. Yes, there are some extras, but usually in the decks that I've worked with, the extras are that you have 2 men and 2 women, because there are men and women cards in the deck. And so that allows the reader to, if you're reading for a person, you're using the man or the woman as a signifier for the reader, you can still have a man or woman appear in the reading, which is really nice. But yes, for the most part, it is only 36. And the imagery is simple. Now, granted, there are decks where the artist or illustrator can take a little advantage of the creativity and it can get a little muddled, but for the most part, the imagery is simple. The dog is the dog. The garden is a garden. Doesn't matter what's going on in the garden. It's just a garden. And the cards are always in the same order, like tarot. A lot of the cards that I have do have numbers on them. Like this one, for example, says that it is number 6, the clouds. That means that the clouds are always going to be number 6. Like I have my cheat sheet, literally in numerical order. So I can always look, oh, what card is it? If I can't find the word, what's the number? So they're always in the same order. And that's, it gets really nice. Sometimes you get complicated imagery for, like, example, this card. Now, if you see this card at first glance, you might say, oh, I see a man and a woman, looks like Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. This might be the garden card. But if I actually pull out, we have this heart at the top. And this is really hard to see, but also saying number 24. Now, if I look at my cheat sheet, 24 is actually the heart. So this is an example of why sometimes the imagery can get a little complicated depending on the artist, because it is not garden, it is the heart. And that's where the numbers come in handy. And that's why it's nice that they're always in the same order. Another thing I like about Lenormand is that you can ask specific questions. What's going on in my love life? What do I need to know about my job? Hey, I'm traveling soon. What do I need to know about that? Because there is a travel card. Again, like Robin said, there are cards for like pieces and parts of our everyday life. And so you can ask questions about those specifically. And another great thing about it is that when you pull the cards and you do the spreads, I always like to do a spread of 7. And this is giving me a story. I'm not just relying on 2 or 3 things to kind of maybe go off of what's going on or to answer the question. I'm looking at multiple cards. And it's telling me a story of what I can potentially expect regarding this question. Another thing I like about it is that it's not as popular. It feels like a special gift that I have, something that I got to learn from taking a class, and I'd never heard of it before. So I was like, for sure, why not check it out? And now that I know it, it's like so awesome. And I love being able to share this with you guys, because then you can go be like, hey, I learned about this really cool new set of cards called Lenormand, and I'm really excited. And hopefully we can spread this love and make it a little bit more popular, because when I go to do Lenormand readings and I ask someone, hey, have you ever heard of Lenormand? Do you know much about it? They're like, no. Awesome. So it's like a little gift that I have being a Lenormand reader. And even though we are comparing Lenormand to Oracle, I feel like with any sort of divination tool, you can use them interchangeably. When I do readings, I do Lenormand spreads, and then I add a couple of Oracle cards. I think that Oracle cards are a great sort of backup to Lenormand, like either can clarify maybe what the cards are trying to tell me, or just back it up completely, like, yep, this is really what's going on. And I think you could do the same thing with tarot as well. Maybe pull a couple of tarot cards and see if they're either adding to what the Lenormand cards are saying, or maybe just clarifying it a little bit more. So you can use them together, which is really nice. So it's not either or. It's not either this or either that. We can all use them together. And then finally, for me, Lenormand is a gateway to tarot. For the longest time, I was like, I will not read tarot cards. I'm a Lenormand reader. But now I'm like, I think I want to learn to read tarot, but it's still really intimidating to me. But so I still have my Lenormand cards to like kind of fall back on, because I'm comfortable with them and I'm used to them. But I'm still kind of edging towards tarot a little bit. So don't worry that like if you start reading tarot, you don't have to read Lenormand, or vice versa. We can all read them together, but it's nice to start with something a little bit simpler, because it helps build your confidence in the end. And that's why I love Lenormand.
And that joy is why we love Nicole.
Okay, perfect. Those are amazing and wonderful reasons to love Lenormand. Okay. All right, I'm going to get back to the explanatory academic portion. The other day I was walking by the river and I found a button in the parking lot that said academics on it. And I'm like, all right, I agree. I am the academic one. Okay. So back to our history lesson, right? Why do we care that Lenormand was developed in the 19th century? And the reason we care, well, one reason that we would care is that it does affect some of the symbolism. So if I pulled up the Lenormand card fish, right? Now, if I ask my little 8-year-old niece, what do fish symbolize? She might say something stinky, right? Something by the ocean, something mom makes me eat. Although actually she loves sushi. She loves sushi. My niece loves sushi, so she loves fish, right? So you want to know that in the 19th century, right, we didn't have stores that you could just hop down and pick up food. So people were very dependent on the local harvest. But if there wasn't enough rain, or if there was rain at the wrong time, the harvest might fail and you could have a famine. Now, what didn't fail was the fish in the river. But the thing is that the river, or at least the rights to the fish in the river, were owned by the local nobility. So the people who got to eat the fish in the time of famine were, that's right, the wealthy people. So thank you, Anna. Fish are friends. I agree. Fish are food back in the day. So anybody want to take a crack at what do fish symbolize in the Lenormand? 19th century, fish owned by the wealthy people, something you could eat when everybody else was starving because the famine. There we go, abundance, especially financial abundance, money coming into your life, right? Actually, a resource that doesn't dry up, something you can always count on, right? So sometimes knowing a little bit about the 19th century symbolism can help you understand where the card is coming from. I think of like that phrase, there's always more fish in the sea. A lot of times it was, there's always more fish in the river. So yeah, but again, you can see you guys are right on it here, right? It's really easy to interpret Lenormand symbols. So now that we're getting so awesome at the symbols of the cards, let's talk about how to actually read them. I noticed that somebody asked if there was a picture of Mademoiselle Lenormand, and I found one. Here is a 19th century engraving of her. You can see she's got her playing cards here that she's reading. And she lived in the era really before photographs, but this is the classic picture of her. So I just thought I'd pull that up. Okay, back to my presentation. This is Notre Dame before it burned. So yeah, this is like a walk on memory lane for me. I'm like, oh, Paris. Okay, all right. Okay, so this is the traditional way to read Lenormand cards, which is that you read them in pairs. People don't typically read individual Lenormand cards, although you can do this. And this is the traditional method. It's a great place to start as you're learning, but you can always diverge from this if you want. So the traditional way to do it is that the first word is the subject. Sorry, the first card is the subject, and the second card is the description of it. So anchor is a symbol of stability and what's constant in life. And lilies are about sort of like your spiritual path, peace, harmony, and beauty. So I would read this pair as an indicator of peaceful stability. So if you asked a question like, I'm giving a presentation today, what can I do to give a great presentation, right? So the anchor says, stay calm, stay stable, don't get too emotional. And then the description says, try to be peaceful, have a peaceful sense of stability about you. You are the center of this presentation. Everybody's here to hear you. You don't have to worry about pleasing them or doing everything right for them. And one of the interesting things about this is that if you read with this method, the order actually matters, because if they're reversed, now we have a new subject and description. So another way to think about this is like the first card is the what, and the second card is the how. So here now my what is something about the spiritual path or peace, and then the how is this sense of stability. So like I might read this as a stable spiritual path. So if I'm giving my presentation today and I pulled up this combination, I might end up with something like, you know, ask your guides, ask spirit to help you, and just have confidence that they're going to keep you online while you're doing your presentation. So if you care about the order and you want to try the traditional pairs, the first card is what the reading is about. And then the second card is like the adjective describing what it is that that subject is going to be like for you today. I personally read in a more intuitive way, and I would probably read both of these as like stay calm and stable, stay grounded and centered, don't get too crazy. And this is the sort of thing that might come up if there was going to be something difficult in your path that day and you needed a little bit of warning in advance to like stay nice and calm and stable and rely on your spiritual resources to get you through a more challenging day. Are there any questions about this basic pair reading concept?
So Robin, when you say that, would you say you pick one or the other of these sides, or do you do both?
So if you are technically, if you're technically reading like the strictly the way to read, you put the two cards up, and then whatever order they come up in, you read. The left one is the subject, and the right one is the description. The left one is the noun, the right one is the adjective. The left one is what's going on, and the right one is how it's going to happen, or how it's going to go down, or how you need to go down in order to make use of it. The what, and then the how. Okay. So this would depend on what order they came up in your spread. Or you could just close your eyes and let the meaning come to you and let spirit talk to you. That's the other way to go. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Any other questions?
And I'll just kind of pop in and say, like, so when I talked earlier about doing a 7-card spread, I'm basically reading them left to right. So like the first card is where the story starts, and then the other cards are either adding to that or building up, you know, beyond that. So the order does matter for me.
Great.
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. You're up, Nicole. You were going to demo a 7-card spread for us.
Yes, so this is a 7-card spread, like what I mentioned before. I just kind of took some pictures and I decided to ask the cards, what do I need to know about my love life? I'm single. What's in the future for me? So at the top, we see a separate picture, and it starts with the stack of cards with the fish on it. Then we have the heart below that. And then to the right is the lady card. So those are essentially like just the cards that I had. The fish was the card right before the heart. So when I'm doing a spread and I'm asking a specific question, and let's say about the love life, I'm going to choose the heart as the signifier, as I call it. So I'm going to shuffle my cards, ask my question, And then once I get done shuffling, I'm going to flip through those cards until I get to the heart. And then once I get to the heart, the cards behind it, I consider like the past or what I've already experienced regarding this question. And so that fish stack, as you can see, there are cards underneath it. Those were cards in the past. And I have my heart. And then after my heart, I pulled 7 cards. We have the path, the ring, the letter, stork, key, tree, and then the anchor. And then I have my other stack with the lady on top. And as you can see, there are some cards underneath her as well. And so where that lady begins would have been right after the anchor. So sometimes, like, let's say if I'm doing a reading and even though I pull 7 cards, I don't quite feel satisfied with how it's ending. I feel like there's some more information that I could delve from this. I can continue pulling cards if there are cards to be pulled. So if I was a little concerned about how to get the first 3, I'll just get to that in a second. So if I wanted to know a little bit more, I could pull that lady and then keep flipping cards after that. So as we're reading this, I'm asking, what do I need to know about my love life? And the first 2 cards, if we were to read them in pairs, as Robin said, I'm seeing the path and the ring. The path, again, you're kind of making a decision. You're choosing a path. And then we have that ring, which usually symbolizes some sort of commitment or a partnership. So maybe by choosing a path, it'll lead to a commitment, is what I could read it, or committing to choosing a path. Who knows? We can go other way. So what else am I seeing? I'm seeing the letter and the stork. The letter literally means a written communication. Now, obviously in this day and age, we don't always write letters to each other, but we text, we email. So this could be some sort of a communication from a person that maybe is leading to a new beginning. Now, yes, typically the stork means a pregnancy or a baby coming, but not always. It could just mean a new beginning of some sort. And then we have the key and the tree. This is a little tricky for me, as to be like, what exactly does this mean? How does it read to my love life? Because the key is usually referring to like unlocking something, or maybe having the knowledge, having the key, but not using it or needing to use it. But it's also next to the tree, which usually symbolizes your health, your body, your environment, or your family. So I don't know what I'm unlocking there or what I already know. But then that's next to the anchor, which again is a stability card. So how this pertains to my love life is a pretty interesting story and can be a little difficult because you're kind of piecing these things together, but still looking at the overall story of what is happening here. So I'm gonna actually ask Robin, if you were to see this spread of 7 cards related to what do I need to know about my love life or relationship, how would you read this?
Am I unmuted here?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, so what I would see here, I think this idea of the path and the ring, I would be asking you, are you really committed to having a relationship, right? You're single and you're like, oh, I'm single. Is there a part of you that's like, I don't know how I feel about having a relationship? Like, are you sure this is the path you want to be on? We want a companion, but are you dating? Are you finding people? Are you asking spirit to help you? Because the idea of the stork and the letter suggests to me that you might have some new messages coming in about what that is for you. Like, you know, maybe you need to be looking in a different place. Maybe you need to be looking for a different kind of person. Maybe you don't really know what you want, and there's part of you that's afraid to really understand the message of your continued singleness. Maybe there are some reasons you're not ready for a commitment yet. Like, open up to what those messages actually might be to help you get onto a new place in all of this. And for the tree and the key is usually opening up a new door or a new path to success. And the tree can symbolize personal, physical, or mental or emotional health. So I would say that the key here might be something about something you have to heal, some way in which you need to grow emotionally. Maybe there are things from old relationships and you're kind of like, well, that didn't go so well. And part of you is a little bit afraid to dive back in. So with the stork, the key, and the tree, you have some really positive cards here, but they suggest that like progress is needed in terms of healing something or moving forward to get you in a better place on this path. And for the anchor and stability, I think what I would ask my questioner is, do you feel like you have the positive side of this? Like, I'm ready for a commitment. I want a relationship. I want to devote my life to somebody and have them be there for me. Or is part of you feeling like, I don't know, maybe part of me is feeling like I'm going to be weighed down. Like, you know, somebody's going to limit me, or my last relationship was emotionally heavy and I'm not really ready to go there again. Because the Anchor is one of those cards that can have the positive connotation of stability, but it can also have the challenging connotation of feeling weighed down, a heavy weight, and not being able to make progress. So which of those two really is it for you? So I think overall this reading gives you an idea that there's a lot of positive progress available, but we have to ask, with the path and with the Anchor on either end, how committed are you to making that progress? And what kind of steps do you need to take to get there in your own heart, so that you're then ready to receive somebody else's heart when the universe brings that to you?
And actually, that is totally spot on. Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.
That was actually, like, if I were to, like, be honest, like, yeah, you nailed it. Do I really want this? I mean, I do, but do I really?
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. And,
Yeah.
and the Lenormand cards have basically just spilled the beans for me. They've read me.
Funny. Nicole sent me this picture like a week ago, right, to put in the presentation. Here we are, Spirit is speaking through the Lenormand cards. There we go.
Could you clarify, Nicole, those 3 cards at the beginning? There's some confusion on one, how you got those, and then again, kind of
the
like
cards up at the top. In
yeah,
the top
the 3
picture?
cards. Mhm.
Oh yeah. So like, let's say this is actually the deck that I used, and I've shuffled the cards, and let's say I ask my question, and I'm looking for that heart card. As I'm pulling the cards, I do have them face up because I want to find that heart. So like that top left where it has the fish on it, these are the cards that I've already pulled. I'm pulling cards, so I'm looking for the heart, for example. So as I'm pulling, I'm waiting, and I'm tagging these cards because they are important, because they've technically been, you know, cards that, or things that I've experienced related to this specific question. So, and let's say, like, pull until I get the heart. I have my 7. So that heart card was my signifier. That was what my question was based on. And then the cards on the right for anything after the heart. Let's say I find my heart, I lay out 7 cards, and then I still have more cards in the deck. So I still want to put those off to the side. I want to keep them in case I need to like keep pulling cards, or like see what else do we have. So yeah, so that's why I did show that, because for me, even though I'm only really focusing on those 7 cards, what was before that and what is after that is still important and can still be used. Like, well, looks like what we're seeing now, but I mean, looking at your past, you've been through a lot. I can see there's been some ups and downs. So let's really see what we can focus on for the future. And that's where I have those 2 separate piles.
Okay, so the fish card was really the old pile, the before pile. That was the last card before it. And then
Yes.
the heart was where you started your reading.
Yep.
And then the lady was actually the card after your reading.
The Anchor. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Lenormand, and that's just how I learned to pull the cards, was to ask a specific question. And if you're not doing, like, well, depending on your layout, and then flipping until you get to that card, that signifier, and then working around that. So that's how I learned to do it. And when I do oracle cards, I just like fan them out and use my finger to pick the card. Same thing with tarot. So like how I read oracle and tarot cards is very different than how I read the Lenormand. Lenormand is more specific for me in how I get my cards.
Okay, so someone was curious on how so if you were going to look to the past, right, and you had that fish there, would you tap into that fish to do part of your reading, or do you just ignore that part of the deck?
You can. So when I learned to do a 7-card spread, I learned that the signifier was in the middle. You had 3 cards to the left, which were the ones directly before that, the 3 directly before that. So it would have been the fish, whatever was after that one, and then the next one. And then after your signifier, you pull 3 cards from the top, and those are like so it's like your most immediate past, the question you're asking, and then your more immediate future. But now I don't focus on the past as much. I like to kind of focus on looking ahead, because most people know what they've dealt with in the past regarding whatever you're asking. They want to know more about what should I expect for the future, because that's unknown to us. And so you can look at the past. I could pull those cards and, you know, run them down a line and kind of see what they're telling us about what I had experienced in the past. But I'd rather focus on the future. But that's why I keep them there, and I keep them in order, so that way I could go back to it if I need to.
Okay. And then are you guys going to talk about picking the card? Like, you picked the heart because you were talking about love life, and Lisa asked, would she pick the fish if she was talking about prosperity?
Yes.
Are you guys going to talk more about that, or just you can pick whichever card you want?
I plan to talk about it very briefly by saying, A, that my book will have a list of signifier cards, but B, if you type into Google Lenormand keyword meanings or Lenormand signifier meanings, there are lists of signifier cards. It's pretty cut and dried and established. So once you get your own deck and you work with it, you'll get a sense of what card means what for you. But if you just type in Lenormand list, like if you go to Pinterest and type in Lenormand, there are lists of 36 cards, and it's easy to come up with signifier meanings. Yep. Okay. I'm going to jump back into more advanced reading. Oh, and somebody just put one of those, a link in the chat. Okay, so this is a simple reading that we've been working on. We are now going to up the ante to more complex readings. I will mention that some of the reading techniques that we're working on here will also work for tarot and oracle cards. So if you're a dyed-in-the-wool tarot or oracle reader, but you think this is cool, you can totally give this a go. So one of the cool things about Lenormand cards is reading them in grids. So typically for a grid reading, this is a 9-card grid, which is a good place to start. You pick a signifier based on your topic, whatever it is. This is a relationship reading for a woman, so I picked the lady as my signifier. And then I, quote unquote, randomly, according to spirit shuffling, drew 8 other cards, and then I shuffled them all together with the signifier, and then I deal them out in a 9-card grid. So the signifier is chosen, the 8 other cards are random, and then the arrangement of the cards in the grid is just random as they were dealt, because we're going to read the signifier. So things we can do here. Now, one thing that's useful to know about Lenormand cards is that some of them have positive set meanings, others have negative set meanings, and others are neutral. And in this particular reading, we've got ring and flowers in the top, which are positive. In fact, we've done all these, right? Ring is relationships, flowers is a gift from life or like a windfall, clover is a bit of small luck. And then we have a negative card introduced here. This is mountain. Anybody want to guess what mountain symbolizes? If it's negative, what do mountains symbolize? Death in the snow? No. Yeah, so mountain is just a symbol of obstacles in general. So one of the things we can do with a grid is we can read the rows. So the top row typically symbolizes whatever's on the surface of the issue. This is a relationship in this case. The middle row is what's going on in the questioner's mind or experience. And then the bottom row is kind of the foundation or the heart of the matter. So here's a chance for you guys to practice. What do you think it means that we have 2 positive cards on the surface, but on the foundation, we have a negative card? What is this questioner going to be feeling or experiencing? Surface level's got 2 positives, plus the questioner herself, this woman. But the foundation of the matter's got this power card with the bear. The stork's about a message coming in or a transition, something new being born. And then this obstacle on the bottom. Anybody have any ideas in the chat? 2 cards on the surface row, 2 positives, but 1 negative on the foundation. Can somebody read some chat options to me? Anybody have any ideas?
I'm seeing angst.
Yeah.
Looks good, but watch for deeper issues.
Yes. See? I knew you guys.
Infidelity.
Yeah, right. Everything looks good on the surface. People around her like, man, you guys are the ideal couple. It's all great, right? But underneath, there's an obstacle coming, right? But we can see that this obstacle, right? And this is the thing, like I think Anna put in the chat that the cards aren't looking good. And sometimes it happens with negative Lenormand cards. You're like, oh man. But Lenormand is great for troubleshooting. And so I would say that deep down, right, the foundation is that all is not as well in this relationship as it looks on the outside. That's probably why this lady has come to see me, because she's feeling this angst and anxiety. But the thing is, this obstacle is right next to the powerful bear. So my hunch is that there's some new personal power coming in where there's obstacles to overcome. but the overall situation isn't bad. There's a lot of good in this reading. And so the woman probably needs to just like level up and exercise some more personal power to be able to overcome this obstacle. So I'm glad she came to read for me. All right, now the next way we can read a grid is, same grid here, is in the columns, right? The left column is the beginning of the situation. The middle column is what's going on right now. And the right column is kind of where it's headed, not necessarily in a predictive sense, but in a like, where is this relationship going for this lady? And you can see we've got a similar situation, right? This relationship probably started off really well, that there were a lot of positive feelings. That's why these people got together. But again, we can see probably why the lady has come in for a reading, that there's some angst maybe. She's like, all right, things are getting difficult heading in the new direction. And now that I'm reading in columns, I can see the ship here is symbolic of a journey, either a physical journey or maybe a mental or emotional journey of growth or new situations. So that might be part of what's causing this obstacle, is that things are changing and the old positive situations, the good luck, the ring, the flowers, the lady senses this is not where this relationship is headed. And so she probably has to embrace the challenge of this voyage in order to keep going. Right? Any questions so far about the grids and columns? I know I'm moving through this kind of quickly, but I'm just trying to give you guys a sense of how this can work. Okay.
Ari, you're muted if you're talking.
I know I muted myself instead of unmuted myself. The only question that popped up, and Nicole kind of answered it, is if during a reading you only ask one question at a time.
So when you have just a few cards like this, you probably only have one question at a time. But I'm going to show you guys a reading in a little bit where you can ask really open-ended questions and ask multiple questions. So it's a good question, and we are getting there for sure.
Beautiful.
All right. Now, another really cool thing you can do with Lenormand is something called knighting. And this will also work with tarot and oracle cards. So you can try this try this out with them. So you might know the knight in chess, right? How does the knight move? It moves over 2 and down 1, or over 1 and down 2. And this brings out subtle or hidden influences in a person's life, in the questioner's life. So if I start with my lady, that's the person asking this question. You can see why I picked the signifier as the lady, right, for relationship, because it really is all about her. If I go over 2 and down 1, I get to clover. Now, we already know that this lady, and this is an actual reading for somebody, and it was true that she was feeling that anxiety, that angst, that uncertainty of the obstacle in this relationship. I would say to this lady, you know what? You might need to be more focused on the small goodnesses in this relationship. She's got her eyes on the mountain, on the journey, on the obstacle. You might need to really dial into just the everyday fact that this guy is a good guy and you laugh together and he's still with you after all these years. And then if we knight her the other way, we get to the bear, right? Down 2 and over 1. She might need to really think of herself as a more powerful person, exercise her own personal power in the situation and not worry so much about the obstacles, but have confidence that she's going to overcome them. And we could do the same thing with any one of these cards. So for example, like if I wanted to know more about the obstacle, I could knight the obstacle, which knights also, if I go over 2 and 1 to the clover. Maybe the obstacle isn't such a bad thing. Maybe the obstacle is actually a piece of good luck that's really going to help this couple become closer. The obstacle mountain would also knight if I went up 2 and over 1 to flowers, another positive card. So maybe this obstacle is actually a gift from the universe and not this like scary thing that the lady is thinking of it as. So knighting is a really cool way to relate cards that are kind of far apart, but it often helps you pull out the underlying influences in what's going on here. Another really amazing thing about Lenormand cards is that it allows you to identify problems and find solutions. So for the Anna who put in the chat that it wasn't looking good, this is a crucial step to take with your Lenormand cards. So classic Lenormand decks, and the Bluebird is one of them, which is why I like it, have 2 lady cards and 2 gentleman cards, and they face in different directions. So you can see this lady's kind of facing to the right, and the gentleman is facing to the left. This tells us here, if we look at this, the lady is facing in one direction and the gentleman is facing the other direction, but they are close together in the grid. So these 2 people are probably physically close, but they're not relating to each other. And I'm getting that because they're facing in opposite directions. The lady is looking off to the future, what's happening next. The guy is still focused on the fact that they have fun together and they enjoy each other. And somehow these two emotionally are not on the same page. Okay, audience participation. What do you think this would mean if it were the opposite? If we had the gentleman here facing to the right, what would that mean if we had the gentleman facing to the right? How would we interpret that if he was facing towards the lady? Any ideas in the chat?
Waiting.
Yeah. I know I'm asking more complicated questions as we get along.
They're more simpatico,
Facing
facing the future. He's
Yes.
more focused
Yeah.
on her.
Perfect. More focused on her, more looking towards the future, right? What we can see now is that these two people are focused on different things in the relationship. And that again might explain why she came for the reading, because she's feeling like they're not on the same page. Now, if I'd gotten the other Lenormand card, that here's the guy who's facing the other way, let's say he was in the lower left, I might interpret this as the opposite challenge. They're facing the same way, but now they're far apart in the grid, right? You can see the guy here is focused on this personal power card. Maybe the lady needs to start exercising some more personal power so she can get more down onto his level. Maybe she's worried and he's avoiding her because he really wants to be powerful. So can you see how we're interpreting the relationship of the cards in the reading and how they work with each other? And this is, again, one of the advantages of the simplicity of the Lenormand symbols, is that they leave plenty of extra brain power for all these other sort of layers of interpretation if you want to go and interpret them this way. Does anybody have any questions about how I've interpreted these facing cards and the orientation?
So there was one question about, can you use this directional interpretation method with like the animals in the cards and the people, or just the people? I said mostly just the people.
Mm-hmm. So I would let your intuition be the guide. Now, it's traditionally done with the people because the people are the only cards in the decks that have options, right? You can see this deck has a gentleman facing to the right and a gentleman facing to the left. There's a lady facing to the right and there's a lady facing to the left. Now, the only way that this bear could face to the right is if it's reversed. And actually, I'm going to talk about reversals, which most readers don't use, but I do use them. But I think if your intuition is telling you that the way the animals are facing is important, you should go ahead with that, because I always believe in trusting your intuition. Spirit is not limited to the classic way of doing it, but the classic way is really to focus on the orientation with just the figure cards, because those are the only ones where Spirit has an option to give you the right facing gentleman or the left facing gentleman. And I will mention, by the way, that my deck has a non-binary card, which also faces both ways. There are 2 non-binary cards in my deck as well. So there are a couple of decks that have non-binary. If you don't have a non-binary deck, but you are reading for somebody who doesn't identify as either male or female, I just suggest adding a sticker or like a sticky note corner to one of the gender cards and making that into your non-binary card. Okay, all right, so there's a ton of other things you can do with grids, and my book has them, and then if you go online, you'll find some other ideas. My book should be available this fall. My book and deck are coming out this fall. But I'm going to move on now to Nicole again for lessons learned.
So actually really quick, Robin, someone did ask if the suits matter, like clubs, diamonds, etc., if you're using the playing cards.
No, so this Lenormand deck, the Bluebird Lenormand, has playing cards in it because early Lenormand decks had playing cards. So it's just kind of a vintage throwback, but I don't actually read any of that, and they're not necessary to be read in Lenormand symbolism.
Okay, and there's still one more question. One person was saying that they were told to only use one of the lady and the gentleman cards unless it was a love reading. So that's a personal choice, you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on whether you want to give Spirit the option to provide more than one card. So that's what I mean about rules, right? Is like, that's like the classic way to do it, is to take out all but one of them. But for me, I like to give Spirit more options to communicate with me. And one of the important things to do when you're learning to read Lenormand cards is to keep a journal, right? Do a reading on a small, low stakes thing. What should I have for dinner? How can I enjoy hanging out with my friends? What should I talk to my sister about on the phone? Something where it can't really go wrong. Write down your reading, have your conversation or dinner or hang out with friends, and then come back and look at how the results of the reading match up with that. So you want to calibrate what you're getting from the cards with your actual real world results. And that will help you figure out whether leaving the extra lady and gentleman in the deck is a good idea for you or not. All right, Nicole, you want to dive in with lessons learned?
Yes, thank you. And so, yeah, I personally, for me, even though I put it in the chat, I like to keep both men and women in the deck because I don't know who's going to pop up in the reading and how it's going to be significant. And I actually have a deck that I backed on Kickstarter, and it's possum based, and it actually has these 4 character cards, plus like I guess what would be traditionally be the man and the woman, but it was like an adventurer and an educator, so it's more of a role in the person's life rather than the sex. But with these character cards, I'm giving the reader the option of how they want to identify themselves if I'm doing a reading for them. So I'm like, who do you want to be in this reading? And then I can let them choose, and I pick that card, put it in the deck, and then shuffle and ask. So that's a great thing about, you know, making your own deck is you can put whatever cards you want in there. You could have 3 women and 3 men, or the non-binaries, whoever you want. And someone mentioned that the ship was directional in her card, and it was. In her card, it was facing left. And one of my cards, it's actually, well, I guess in this direction it's facing left, but when I look at it, it's facing right. So sometimes the objects, it doesn't matter what direction they're facing, it's just really what the object is. Just saying. All right, lessons learned. I think with anything else and what we sort of talked about is finding your own way to do things. Like I said, when I took the my Lenormand class, I was taught that the 7 card spread is 3 to the left is past, signifier, 3 to the right, future. I don't really do that anymore. So I kind of am finding my own way to do readings. And I like to stick with the 7. The 9 card spread is amazing because you get a lot more information from it. Maybe I want to keep things a little simpler. So I'm going to stick with the 7 card. And definitely, like I said, use the spreads that work best for you. If you only want to do like a 3 card spread, maybe because you just want a little bit of information, that's totally fine too. Or you could use the whole grand tableau, which is the entire deck, and just lay them out and be like, oh, what is the path to my love life? What's the path to my career? What are the cards along the way? So that's where you can kind of look at different areas of your life if you're using the entire deck as a spread. Another thing that I've learned is I don't need to focus on the past, like I said. I want to focus on the future in the readings. You can look back at the past, and that's fine if it gives you some information and kind of, you know, maybe the person feels a little more connected, like, okay, I believe these cards a little bit more because, yes, I have experienced that in my past, so maybe I can trust them to see what I'm looking forward to in the future. Another thing I've learned is to practice on your friends before you do readings. Like anything else, whether it's tarot or oracle, read for your friends because you probably know them a little bit better. And so it's easier to trust the cards if you kind of know the person. But honestly, like once you get to the point where you're comfortable and you're doing readings on people and they're like, oh my gosh, that is so true. I'm like, awesome. That's what the cards are telling me. So I'm glad it's fitting. But yeah, so practice. And with people that you know and trust and know that like if you do mess up, they're not going to judge you for it. So that just kind of gives you more confidence going forward. And I think that's the same with tarot and oracle. Practice on those that you love or that you trust, and then you'll build that confidence to read for strangers. Another thing I've learned is don't feel pressure to memorize the meanings of the cards before you do readings. Even though I've been using Lenormand for, well, honestly, only really a year now doing readings, I will always have my cheat sheet with me. Because sometimes I'm like, what does this mean again? Or because, you know, you can have multiple keywords for each card. Like the child, it could be young person. It could be someone childlike. It could be immaturity. So I kind of want to see my options of what the cards can mean and kind of see how they relate to the cards around them. So I always have my cheat sheet. I'm never going to feel forced to memorize everything. I don't care how long I've been reading. I will have this with me. And another thing, get to know your deck before you do readings. I think it's the same with any sort of system, even with tarot. Like you get the decks where they have different symbols for the suits, as we call them. Like instead of a cup, it could be a bowl or maybe some sort of vessel of some sort. And it's the same thing with Lenormand. My possum deck, I absolutely love it. But instead of having the whip card, which is literally a whip, it's the birch. And I have to admit, for a while, I was saying, oh, birch is a tree. even though it's not really it doesn't look like the tree card, I'm associating birch with tree, even though the meaning is completely different. So definitely get to know your decks, especially if they do sort of deviate from the traditional imagery. The cards I was showing before is Mystical Lenormand. I have to be honest, I do not use this deck. I don't like it whatsoever. The imagery is complicated and it throws me off. And so even though I have these cards, I haven't found the right home for them yet. And maybe I keep them just to remind myself that I prefer an easier card to read than something a little more complicated. Like that Garden of Eden card came from this. I have never used this deck and I will probably never use it because they're just, some of the images are they like contradict each other in my opinion. So definitely get to know your deck before you use it. And if you don't like a deck, that's totally okay. Like I said, I don't like this thing whatsoever, but I absolutely love this deck, which I'm sorry guys, I don't have a name for it. It was actually created for the class that I took. And so a person created this. You can create your own decks. Find imagery that you like, Google it, find like free images. You can create your own deck. And that way you can be comfortable knowing, I know what this card means, and I know what it means to me. And so you can rely on those images. Then if you're doing your own readings, like, oh yeah, I see this, and I really resonate with this because I created it myself. So don't be afraid to make your own decks and get creative with it.
So there's a question, are Lenormand the size of regular playing cards?
Not always. So
there you go.
This
Sorry, Robin answered it in the chat.
This might be like a regular playing card, right? About the size of my palm. The ones that I love, they're smaller, a little more square. My possum ones are, again, about palm size. But I actually have, this is a deck that I got that I kind of really love. It's like these photo negative images, super simple. And these are, I guess in essence, they're a little bit bigger. They're about almost my entire palm.
Okay.
So they vary in size like anything else.
Awesome.
All right. So I just want to ask about our time. We like to do a couple of readings. There's more to get through in terms of different types of readings, and I want to quickly illustrate a grand tableau. But I just want to make sure, are we out of time at 10:30 or are we able to stay after? Where are we on that?
We are not, unfortunately. So at that 11:30, 10:30, 12:30, wherever you are, Mark, that is the end of our time. I hate to say that, but there's another meeting scheduled with this room.
Well, I would say then that it's time for us to actually do a sample reading for an audience member. And maybe we'll all reconvene for part 2, which will include the Grand Lenormand, the Grand Tableau, a couple of interesting reading types, and then more instructions on how to make your own Lenormand cards, because I think we had so much fun today that we have a whole overlap. Also, I was going to let people know that if people are interested in practicing reading, go ahead and send me an email. My email is robin@poolmx.com. I'll put that in the chat.
Robin, did you want to put up the last slide with our information really quick so people can write that down?
I do, yeah. Okay, so maybe Ari can go ahead and pick the person who's going to get a reading for today. And here's our contact information. If you want to, if you're interested in a practice session, you can go ahead and send me an email, and I'll let you know, because I think it'll be fun to get to Zoom and practice reading Lenormand cards. So here's me on the left-hand side, Robin at Pool MX. You can also schedule a time if you want to meet with me on my website, spiritsaid.com, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I leave daily Lenormand tips on TikTok at Spirit Said Style. And then we've got Nicole on the right here. She's on the AZ Partners page. You can contact her at wonderbearreadings@gmail.com, and she's offering a 50% discount if you sign up for a reading by April 25th, $20, which is a really good price for a 7-card spread with 2 oracle cards. And I work on a sliding scale, so we can discuss what fits with your budget if you want to contact me.